In today's video, we're going to do a year-long recap of the top 17 stories from 2017. I figured since today is December the 31st, 2017 is coming to a close, we should do a quick recap of all the top stories this year. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. On this channel, we review and analyze all 31 NHL teams with an unbiased opinion. So if you love hockey, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss anything. Alright, so as we discussed in the opener, I'm going to count down what I believe are the top 17 stories from 2017 and related to the NHL. Now obviously, I had a really hard time deciding the order of these stories, so certainly feel free to leave lots of comments debating whether or not you feel one story might have been more important than the other. I didn't have too hard a time determining what the top 17 stories were, but I did have a hard time kind of putting them in any kind of an order. It's a little challenging. A few of them were a little easier than others, so certainly feel free to leave comments to debate the order if you wish. So starting off, number 17, Bryan Bickell. Obviously, Bryan Bickell had a very tough year being diagnosed with MS. Obviously ended up in the Carolina Hurricanes organization, but watching him make a comeback to the NHL and get to play one final game, announce his retirement, and score the a shootout goal on his final game, it was very emotional for him and everybody watching. So Bryan Bickell is a very inspirational story, and to me, he definitely cuts this list, so I have him down as number 17. Alright, at number 16, we've got Henrik and Daniel Sedin, both reaching 1,000 points. Obviously, this is the first time in NHL history that two brothers both reached a milestone, and obviously definitely the first time that they were twin brothers at that. So obviously the Sedin brothers have had quite a career in Vancouver, and for both of them to reach 1,000 points so close together certainly made that a special couple of moments that I've kind of put into one here. But the Sedins reaching 1,000 points definitely cuts the list for being one of the top stories this past year. At number 15, we've got the Arizona Coyotes losing streak to start the 17-18 season. Obviously, as we knew coming into the season, the Coyotes weren't expected to be overly good, and obviously they had a really rough year last year. But they keep finding ways to seem to get worse. And this year they went over the first 20 games without having a regulation win and breaking a record that nobody really wants to hold. So as much as we can argue that the Arizona Coyotes were a bad team, they're a historically bad team. And obviously it looks like time might be running out for their franchise in Glendale. And I wouldn't be completely shocked to see them move here in the next year or two if they can't get something figured out for an arena. But their losing streak definitely makes this list. Number 14, we get the Detroit Red Wings and their historic long playoff streak coming to an end at 25 years. Obviously, the other big thing that happened with Detroit at the end of last season was the closing of Joe Louis Arena, as this year they moved into their new arena, Little Caesars. So obviously Detroit's long playoff streak was quite a record. Hard to say if that'll be beat anytime soon, but it was a big streak that came to an end, so I certainly felt it was noteworthy of making this list for 2017. So we'll see Detroit not looking like they're going to start a new playoff streak this year, but they're certainly got a lot of good pieces in place as they look to improve their team for the future. And I'm not sure they'll ever duplicate that 25-year run again, but it's certainly something that franchise can be very proud of. Number 13, the return of the Devils. Nobody, including myself, I don't think if there anybody out there that predicted New Jersey would be good this year, certainly leave me a comment, because I never heard of anybody making that prediction this year. They were a very bad team last year. They got the number 1 overall pick. They certainly went with a lot of youth this year. I think a lot of us agreed that they probably would be better, but probably not better enough in that tough Metro division to really make a big leap in the standings. But they really went with a lot of rookies and a lot of youth this year, and they're having a major impact. And that team is really relevant and good again, and it happened really, really fast. So I think you got to give the coaching staff and the management team there some credit, but nobody would have predicted this. So this is one of the big stories this year, is just how good the Devils really are this year. Number 12, we have Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs. The reason for me this is a big story is not really one particular thing that happened, but just the whole picture together just shows how that draft choice and the development of this player has completely transformed their franchise. Now, not to give the other young guns any disrespect, or some other good young players on that team as well, but Matthews is by far, as I'm sure everybody would agree, the best player on that team. and he's made the Maple Leafs, after all those years of struggles, relevant again. They had their first taste of playoff hockey in a long time last year. Obviously, they didn't go so well, but it was a great experience for them, and they're off to a great start this year. And that franchise has been completely transformed and is completely relevant and one of the top teams in the NHL again, mainly due to Austin Matthews. Number 11, Marion Lemieux, making the news again as he's voted the top moment of the past 100 years. Marion Lemieux's 5 goals in 5 ways ended up winning through votes to be the top moment of the first 100 years in NHL history. I mean, I remember watching that game when it first happened way back. That was quite a game for him, and he was such a dynamic player. He was certainly one of my favorites growing up. And it was great to see that this moment was chosen, because it's certainly one of my all-time favorites. And even after all this time, with all the celebration of 100 years, Marion Lemieux tops our list for one of the top 17 stories being voted for one of the top, or the top moment of the past century. Number 10, Matt Duchene is finally traded. After months and what felt like years of speculation that Matt Duchene wanted out of Colorado and that he was on the trading block, Joe Sakic finally pulls the trigger and a massive 3-way deal with the Ottawa Senators and Nashville Predators. Duchene ends up going to Ottawa, Turris goes to Nashville, and the Avalanche end up with a king's ransom of draft picks and young prospects. Joe Sakic was criticized a lot for holding out on this deal, but he did fantastic and won his haul in return, and it's worked out very well for all teams except Ottawa. Not to slight Matt Duchene, he has played well, but just messing with that chemistry, like that team has done terrible ever since his arrival. I don't think you can blame Duchene, but it's certainly Ottawa's just not the same this year. But the fact that he was finally traded after months and months and months of speculation tops the list at number 10 with the top 10 story of the year. Number 9, the NHL does not go to the Olympics. The NHL does not work out an agreement to attend the 2018 Winter Olympics and send the NHL players. This is quite a story. I know a lot of players are not happy about it, as they really would like the opportunity to represent their country on the biggest stage. However, there's lots of reasons why we could debate why it didn't happen, but at the end of the day, it did not. And it's quite a news story, and I know it's something that's going to be debated for future when they renegotiate the CBA, etc. going forward, because I know it means a lot to the players. But the fact they didn't go was a big story this past year, and definitely deserves to be on this list. Number 8, Bryan Boyle. Bryan Boyle was unfortunately diagnosed with a form of cancer during this past offseason as we headed into training camp with New Jersey. Bryan Boyle has been quite a story this year. He's been able to make a comeback. Thankfully, the form of cancer he was diagnosed with was very treatable if detected early, and it's something that he should be able to work through and be just fine. But it's certainly a scary moment dealing with the C word in any scenario. Boyle has been an inspiration to a lot of NHL players dealing with this condition, and the fact that he's been able to play through it and actually score some big goals for his team and contribute, he's been quite an inspirational story and definitely warrants making this list. Number 7, the Ottawa Senators fall from grace. I know at the beginning of this year, there's a lot of people had high hopes for the Senators after their great playoff run last year. And I also know that there were some experts and some people out there in the hockey world that weren't convinced they were going to be able to duplicate that and expected things to be on the downside this year. But I don't think anybody has predicted that they would be as bad as they are and are going through all the speculation that they are about moves and roster trades and all that, because they've really, really fallen from grace. And I don't think anybody could have predicted just how bad they would be this year. So I think their fall from the standings is certainly justifies being on this list at number 7. Number 6, back to the Ottawa Senators one more time. And I don't think that anybody would have predicted their playoff run as well as their fall from grace this year. So the fall from grace story is a little bit more, I ranked that one step lower because I know there's all kinds of people out there who like to rag on the Senators and didn't think that they would be as good as they were last year or this year. But I don't think, like I mentioned, anybody would have thought they would have been as bad as they are. But their playoff run last year with Clark MacArthur's return, and not only his return, but he inspired the team, as well as Craig Anderson and his wife dealing with cancer, and MacArthur scoring that big series-winning goal against the Bruins, certainly took everybody by surprise. And I think that definitely deserves to be on this list at number 6. Number 5, the Nashville Predators playoff run all the way to the finals. Now I have them ranked one step ahead of the Senators because in my opinion their playoff run last year was even more of a bigger surprise considering they were ranked as a wildcard team going into the playoffs. Now Nashville surprised everybody, and of course they're not taking anybody by surprise anymore. But that playoff run to the final and how into their fans and the city, it was quite a story, as I mentioned. But that playoff run last year was really special. They caught a lot of new fans, and they caught a lot of people off guard, and that certainly was a major story in 2017. Or, which is something that just recently happened, and the fallout from it hasn't happened yet, but the NHL agrees to accept an expansion application from the city of Seattle. Seattle, as we all know, recently got their arena funding in place, and that has made major headlines as they really want to attract an NHL team to their city, and it looks as though expansion just might be the way to go. So the NHL, upon hearing that news, has agreed to accept an application, and a lot of people, myself included, seem to think that it's a foregone conclusion that team number 32 in the NHL will be in Seattle. Makes a lot of sense based on the city and their demographics, and the fact that the NHL really wants to add a Western team to even out the conferences. So that is big news in my opinion, and in 2018 we'll probably have one of the big news stories that they do get accepted, so stay tuned for that. Number 3, the NHL cracks down on slashing and also throws in the face-off penalty for face-off violation. The slashing crackdown, a lot of that I think came from Sidney Crosby's hack on Mark Mathot last year, where he basically severed off the end of his finger. But I think in the long run, this is going to be good for the league as scoring is way up this year, and I think a lot of that has to do with the crackdown on the slashing. Number 2, the Pittsburgh Penguins repeat back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, something that hasn't been done in 20 years. Certainly made a big story. Now, obviously, things are a little bit different for the Penguins this year in their pursuit for a three-peat, but the fact that they could go back-to-back in the salary cap year and win back-to-back championships is quite a feat, and I don't think anybody would argue that that was definitely one of the biggest moments of 2017. Number 1, the Vegas Golden Knights enter the NHL and are good immediately. The Vegas Golden Knights entering the league alone would have been a story on its own this year, but the fact that they're so darn good and are making a run for the playoffs and first place in their division is completely outstanding. Took everybody off guard by surprise, and I don't think anybody would have predicted this or seen this coming. Obviously, as an expansion team, a lot of people assumed they would be low in the standings and not very good, but they proved everybody wrong. So that alone is a major story, and in my opinion is even more relevant than the Penguins winning back-to-back championships. So there you have it. There's my top 17 stories from 2017. So make sure you leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think. Is there any stories you felt were bigger and deserve to be on this list? If so, let's discuss down in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. This will be our last video of 2017 since today's December the 31st. So we're looking forward to a very good 2018. Watch this channel grow as high as we can. We've had an awesome growth with views and subscriber counts. So thank you very much everyone for a great start to 2017. And we can't wait to see just how high and how much growth we can get out of this channel during the next year. So Happy New Year everybody. I'll see you next year.